Hello and welcome to this month's Gnosis Drawing video. So, for this month, I thought I'd talk a bit more about the drawing because this month's actually had a very interesting kind of drawing process that went over it, which we'll get to see the time lapse as it occurs, but I thought I'd just, take some time to kind of explain and talk more about my thoughts over it. So, before we get into that though, I just want to say thank you for stopping by and checking out this video. Gnosis is if you're just finding this in your feed and it just pops in, Gnosis is a webcomic that updates 3 times a week, usually Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays. And we have a great story and small community building up there. So you can use the link in the description. It'll take you right to the website, and hope to see you there and hope you enjoy the read and what you find. So, kind of talking a bit more about this drawing, is this one was an interesting use in kind of the AI process. And what I mean by that is I've been using AI to kind of do a lot of different iterations usually 4 iterations on a drawing to kind of get a feel of kind of what I like and what I don't like, and different ways of how I could improve my final art piece, just seeing what I can learn from the AI. And what this one ended up coming out with is I learned I did not like what the sketch results were giving me. I basically, after running it through the AI it's kind of like, I don't think I like any of these, so I ended up just kind of reinventing the drawing as I went along. So this became like I said, an interesting case of AI just telling me that, hey, your fundamental is wrong, you're going to have to work on it in a different way. And so that's what I ended up doing. So this drawing started off with kind of an idea of, I think I originally called it Scrap Knight La Vida, and it was just idea of kind of this knight whose armor was kind of put together from a lot of different pieces, and things were kind of being mismatched and just real thrown together and still kind of marching on and whatnot. And the AI results weren't coming back with anything good. I think part of it was trying to unify the armor, and so it all ended up matching. And that just didn't quite look right. The armor design itself didn't look scrappy enough. It kept wanting to do like proper paladin plated armor or things in that kind of nature. So it didn't look scrapped and put together. So the drawing ended up getting reinvented as we went through. Probably one of the most interesting things is, just as I started sketching off, I kept kind of the unicorn horn design on the helmet, and this would end up changing taking a change as I went through further down, kind of working from the head downwards. A lot of the armor started kind of, I say, incorporating skulls, but kind of this hodgepodge idea of, rather than having like proper armor plates, especially on the chest, that they were like skulls that were taken from fallen foes that have been like chained together to make armor and such. And kind of one of the big ideas I had, so when I do these drawings, I usually don't do them all in one sitting. I'll do them over the course of a month. So like for this drawing, and this kind of leads to some interesting results. This was I think like an 8.5 hour long drawing time total, but that's 8.5 hours of me basically operating at like top form, top speed. I'm not tired and worn out, so there's no kind of, and I've had time to think about stuff. And so her belt buckle kind of became like a idea of taking like a Oni skull with like the big teeth coming out of the upper jaw into tusks or whatnot, and having just kind of rings looped around those that that kind of chains come off. But since I had that Oni skull there, I decided to kind of keep this imbalanced idea with it. I mean, have one of the horns broken, like it's like when she killed it with her mace, it's smashed in on the head and broke one of the horns. So I took that horn off of the belt buckle and moved it up onto her head, but instead of having kind of like a unicorn looking horn thing, I set it off to the side. So she's like now wearing its horn as a bit of a trophy. So that's just kind of a fun little storytelling thing that developed in it. And there's different stuff you can see in there, like the teeth of the skulls. Some are missing, and they're not exactly even. And one of the patterns that kind of emerged as I was working on this was this idea of kind of like a ribbed sheet of, I say kind of like a ribbed sheet of metal, but you have like a plate of metal with a band going over it, and then you got rivets holding that band in together. So that's just kind of a visual motif or pattern that's existed throughout this whole armor in a lot of respects. And so even though that ended up not making it, I guess you could say, necessarily as uneven and scrapped together as the initial concept design was, it ended up, I think, giving it a much more worn down and kind of heavy look to it. Like it's a little hard to see, you have to look for it, but there's parts of the armor that are chipped and broken, and some of like the rivets, like you can really see it on her right shoulder plate, where there's rivets missing from where just big chunks of the armor have been taken off at. To kind of keep that uneven feel with the armor, a lot of the chain rings that go across the armor and kind of hold stuff together are actually more heavily, I guess, implemented on the right side of her body. So, like kind of going from the belt buckle to one of the hip plates, you'll see you have two chain rings going off of that, one off of the tusk and one off of the horn, to a ring that's on the hip plate. And we don't really see this, but there'd be a single chain ring going off the back of that around to the back of the belt. On her left side, focusing again with the skull belt buckle, on her left side of the belt buckle, you'll see one chain coming off of the tusk and going around the other side. Probably, so that's just kind of like an example of kind of keeping the uneven feel with it, is a lot of kind of the visual weight and details are on the right side of the body, as opposed to the left side, which it will largely be protected by this big heavy shield. So kind of using the chain as like extra armor. And so kind of in line with that, so that's kind of what used to create that visual weight idea. Another kind of fun idea I came up with much later, I think the left side of the shield was one of the last things I did on this drawing. So it'll probably be a bit of a minute before we see it in the video. But was having like a big skull on her left shoulder pauldron that's got a chain coming out of its mouth that's attached to the shield, so it's like it's helping hold on to it. So that way, if the shield like tried to be yanked away or fall or whatnot, that big old heavy chain would keep it, help keep it attached to her and such. And so it's kind of I thought just a really cool idea of not just having the skulls have adornment, but kind of how or armor, but just kind of how they work off of that. Like I said, just a big skull with a chain coming out of its mouth that's holding the shield on, and it's just, the skull's just kind of strapped onto there. So yeah, I think this was a drawing that's been that really took a different approach from the sketch and just kind of figuring stuff out as I went along with it. There's some interesting stuff I tried with the background. I tried a much more kind of like painted render look in the background. I don't know what I think about this. I think there are some good aspects to it, and I might need to practice it more. That it kind of helps set the character apart from the environment. The big question I have about that is, does it do it in a good way, or does it just kind of do it where they just look disconnected and that they're not part of the same drawing? So that's something that we'll have to, I guess I'll have to experiment more with in time and get more feedback on. So yeah, we'll kind of, I guess, just let this continue to play out, and you can let me know at the end what you think about the background and the character connection, as well as arm and all that jazz. So yeah, that's kind of, I thought, just a fun little moment I'll take to talk more about kind of the drawing process. So kind of on to, I guess, what would be our main topic of the month would be a bit on my favorite movies and such. I don't think that's something I've talked too much about, and it might be something fun to talk about. Alright, so kind of with my favorite movies. The interesting thing I have about movies is I have a pretty decent memory, so I can't watch a movie a whole lot because I just remember it from the first time I see it so well. So I end up not being, I'm really not that big of a movie guy, or at least watcher of them, and especially repeat times. But that's just a interesting problem I have with them. But I do think that kind of as a result of that, potentially, I've come to enjoy movies that cause me to think more, that because I can remember them pretty well, I get to ponder on them more and kind of stew it over and think on it and such. And so that's been a really helpful experience with that, and kind of in my form of and growing a appreciation of storytelling and visuals and such, that because I just get to keep milling it over in my head, I get to just appreciate it more and more. So with kind of that in mind, I've talked a bit about Star Wars and Lord of the Rings back in my 3 most influential good versus evil stories. So while I like those a lot, I won't talk much about those here. Instead, I guess I'll talk more about kind of the one-offs movies that I just really enjoy. And so, like, for example, one of the ones I enjoyed a lot as a kid, especially grown and more as I've grown up, would be the first Jurassic Park film. That, you know, as a kid, it's just like, hey, dinosaurs are awesome and they're fun. And as an adult, it's like, guess what? Dinosaurs, they're awesome and they're fun. So that's just continues to be a really, really fun experience with that. But where I think the first one really benefits that none of the other Jurassic Park films, even the more recent ones, ever really get to be that good, is that I wouldn't say that there's a sense of wonder that's lost, but maybe, I guess, that authenticity of the first one. And so, like, I'm thinking of, you know, the first real dinosaur you see is the Brachiosaurus, and, you know, you got the John Williams music going on, and you have it walking and such, and munching on a tree, and all that jazz. Just a great scene. And Dr. Grant and Adler just in complete shock at what they're looking at, which somehow they did not seem to notice or hear it until they pulled literally right up next to it. Now, this is a scene that they've tried to replicate in basically every other Jurassic Park film. The big moment, oh, dinosaurs are amazing, aren't they, scene. And I think part of the problem is that because it worked so well in the first Jurassic Park film, they have to keep doing it. So it just doesn't feel authentic. It feels more like an obligation. And that's just something that, and once again, this is probably just the the other end of me remembering things too well, I just mill this over too much. And, if the other films, I kind of end up souring on it. Because, they just did that because the first one did it. But, yeah. So, something else I'd say that really kind of helps that work is, once again, because this is the first film, this is the first dinosaur that we've properly seen, all right? And so it's just all the wonders there, because not only are Grant and Adler, this is the first dinosaur they're seeing, it's also the audience's first one they're properly seeing. Because, you have the Velociraptor at the start, but you only see, like, its eye, and it pulling someone into a cage, so you don't quite get that visual of it. And in a lot of the other Jurassic Parks, when they try to have their wonder scene, you've also had dinosaurs already munching down on people and such. So there's a bit of, I guess you could say, disconnect at that point. It's like, oh, they're wonderful. It's like, yeah, when they're not chewing on your behind. So that's just something that some of the later ones kind of, I think, they put the scene too late into the film for it to work there. And it sounds like it's contradictory what I'm saying with the Velociraptor. The first Jurassic Park opens up with someone being eaten by a Velociraptor, and then you have the Wonder Dinosaur scene after that. I think it's spaced far longer enough, so kind of the shock of that Velociraptor attack has kind of faded. But once again, you don't really get to see the Velociraptor there. So that's why I think the Brontosaurus Wonder scene works so well. Some other elements that I think make the Jurassic Park work very good is, and this wasn't something I thought much more about until I got older and learned more about films and actors and different stuff, and that is that really, in a lot of respects, it's actually a horror film. Just how it works, that you have this whole park that they use the excuse of a storm to empty out the park. All right, so you don't have to have this massive slaughter or body count or anything to get our characters isolated. And then you have kind of just the roaming threats, particularly if the Velociraptors kind of working like, I guess you could say, like our stalker horror villain or whatnot, kind of like a Michael Myers or whatnot, that you just never quite know when they're going to jump out and attack people. Then you got also kind of the Tyrannosaurus, that will sometimes appear, and it's just a big unbridled force of nature that can't be stopped. So if the Velociraptors are a stalker type of horror villain, then the Tyrannosaurus is a unbridled force of nature type of horror villain. That you just don't, less like you don't know when it's going to appear, but more of it's just kind of a big constant roaming threat that there's nothing you can do to stop it. There's no locked door that's going to prevent it from coming and getting you. It's just going to go through a wall or what have you. And even though we only really see the Tyrannosaurus, I guess, in like 3 shots of the film, well, I say 3 shots of 3 scenes of the film, it certainly leaves a big impact with kind of that feeling and presence it has. So it leaves a big impact. It's a big dinosaur. And so that's just something that's a little interesting there in how that's presented and such. So that's just something that, as I've gotten older and learned more about stuff, that's come to recognize, like, oh, this ultimately has horror at its roots with some of its design. So, kind of in line with that, as I've learned more also a bit about the books and such. I haven't taken the time to read them, so I'm not going to claim that I'm that in-depth familiar, but kind of what people have talked about with like the books is that not Dr. Grant, gosh, I forgot, John Hammond, that's his name. John Hammond, that in the book he's a much more kind of money grubby type of guy that he just wants to make a whole bunch of money, so that's why he makes dinosaurs and such. But that Spielberg changed this in the movie, to make him a far nicer, and not even necessarily sympathetic, but a nicer guy that just wanted to, truly make something, and it got out of control. And I think that, and as other video essays have broken down, but that I've come to really appreciate, is that that's helped shifted the perspective of basically the, beware of science, or as the ethos that they say is that, life finds a way, is that, we can't always control these type of things. And so by not making it like a money grubbing issue that just says that, the blame could be passed off of, oh, the parks failed because it was an evil money guy in charge of it. It passes it off as to a good intentioned dreamer that things got out of their hands. That, yeah, these things can't be controlled. You can't control the storm, you can't control the dinosaurs. And so that's just something that I've come to appreciate as I've gotten older. Just that subtle change of character kept the focus more on that nature's not something that can be controlled and can get out of your hands, despite all your efforts and attention. Versus, like I said, if they kept it just, oh, he's just a greedy money guy, who've been, well, he's a bad guy, that's why it failed. And so, as I've talked about with kind of with other stories and such, I think there's value in a narrative instead of having I guess you're called the justice or comeuppance for a bad character. There's really not a bad character or person in the story. Some things just happen, and we have to learn how to deal with that. So I think there is some value in kind of that aspects and lessons that can be learned about in life. So, kind of talking about onto another movie I really enjoy would be the first Indiana Jones film. Now, I think the other ones, they're okay, but I think the first one it feels like the most refined version, as kind of as they've talked about with the old dime store novels and such, kind of that adventure feel. It does a good job of kind of the globe trotting to these different exotic places in the world, and kind of the old adventure. I say that old adventure, but just kind of the dirtiness of it, the ruggedness of it, but also the finding of the treasure in it. I think it just does a really good job, kind of distilling it down to that one single. I say that one single idea, but those single elements. The other ones, I think, they don't quite seem to do as good of a job with it. Where they either add unnecessary, details or complications to the story that kind of slightly distract from it, or they just don't have that feel to it. So, like, this is going to sound kind of weird, but I guess you could say the crux of finding the Ark of the Covenant versus the Holy Grail difference. So, finding the Ark of the Covenant is kind of everything that's led up to it. As you've had the infiltration, the solving the medallion puzzle and the cool little map room and light thing on it, followed by this big digging scene going off, and then they go down into the well, solve the snake issue, and get the Ark out. All right. And then you have the rope drop, and it looks like Indy's been betrayed by his friend, but really it's the Frenchmen and the Nazis are up there, having stopped his him having seized the Ark and their operations and such. So you have that scene compared to with the Holy Grail, where they are kind of, his dad is being held captive. He's been betrayed by the woman. The bad guys are there, and he's having to go through and solve the puzzles of the traps leading up to the Grail. And you got kind of the back and forth scene of his dad thinking and figuring stuff out, and Indy thinking on his own and figuring stuff out to kind of help explain to the audience of what's going on. And then by the time you get to the grill, you have the great thing with the knight there and choosing which grill is correct, the correct one. I say grill, but it's probably grill. So that's gonna choosing the correct grill. Yeah, he chose a propane one or a charcoal one. So yeah, there's that great little speech issue on my part coming about. And while those scenes are good, I don't think it works quite as well because too much to the audience seems to be explained in the moment leading up to finding the treasure with the grail. And then, he still has to find a way out of this after the fact, so you don't get that sudden surprise twist like you do with the arc of, oh, they've actually been caught. So, well, I don't think it's bad. I think that it's just not that your thoughts are distracted a bit about what's going on with the bad guys and his father and stuff, rather than just solely focused on the treasure. So I think that's just kind of an interesting little element to that. You also have, I think over the course of the third one and first one, a bit of issue with what I'll call the companion character, as kind of the person he's working with and dealing with as the story goes on. So eventually become and arguably the only good one that that he has and such. So she's a very in her own right. Once okay, I think I fixed it. It looked like my mic just briefly disconnected. Glad I caught that before I recorded a whole 20-minute segment again, something like that. So, kind of going, as I was saying, that Mary eventually becomes a love interest. She's a very enjoyable character. She's got a lot of personality in her own right, and she can figure stuff out too, as well. The drinking scene and getting her interrogator drunk the Frenchman drunk to escape is pretty good. Followed up by the great interrogator scene with the guy's sinister coat hanger, Gizmo. So that's a pretty just fun back-to-back scenes. And the third one you have his dad, which again is not a bad character, but and you even get some fun with kind of the conflict of them arguing back and forth with each other over different things. But in some respect, because he's such a older character and not as prone to, I guess you could say, the action scene, his dad doesn't quite get to, I guess, have as many, I guess you could say, as expressive or momentum moments from story to story. And from moment to moment in the story. He does have that great scene of scattering the birds with his umbrella to take out that airplane. And I think that would have, I guess, potentially been something that could have maybe done more in a story, is instead of relying on his physicality, because he's smart, that basically he uses his knowledge more to solve problems and outwit people, but he's not, I guess you could say, as action-based as Indiana Jones. So he comes off as, I wouldn't say he comes off, but he just doesn't quite, it wouldn't make sense for him to see a bunch of people climbing up on a ladder or whatever, and then he just kind of nudges it and pushes it over, and they fall. That just doesn't seem like something that's in character from him. He's not about hurting people. and is shocked at what Indy does and such. So, like I said, I don't necessarily think he's a bad character. I think just what he's able to do in the story and such is kind of limited, because he's gotten hammered on two fronts. He's not very physical, and he's not quite as willing to hurt people. So he just kind of is a lot more passive in a lot of that respect for a side character. So I think that's something that's just kind of hampers his role as a companion to the story, is that he's unable to as often take the weight off of stuff that's going on with Indy, and handle some things as well, so that Indy could deal with a bigger problem with that. So for the kind of the final movie, I think I'll talk about probably actually be my most favorite movie of all time. So it's not like I think that this is the greatest movie ever, but certainly the one that's had one of the biggest impacts on me, and that would be Dragonheart. That's once again the first one and only one. I hear people say there's other ones. I've never heard of them. I think they're just yanking my chain with that. But yeah. So with the first Dragonheart, well, the first and only Dragonheart film, what I really appreciate in that is, I mean, I like dragons. Dragons are cool. I liked them as a kid, and I think that they're still fun as an adult. Is just kind of I say the sense of adventure, but kind of the I'd say at its core would be the old code, and kind of a story about I guess you could say a knight regaining his lost belief in believing that something's good, that there are good things in the world, and that that it's good. I say it's good. It's important to be a good person. So you also get a lot of great scenes in there, like when you first properly see Draco as he comes bursting out of the waterfall. There's I say slow build up and teases, like you see kind of his silhouette in his eyes and his finger and such. I mean, even the fire breath, and kind of just a bit of the and then all of a sudden at once, the build-up's done, he just bursts out of the waterfall. And you got this great chase scene as Borin, I think is his name, chases him down on his horse to try and kill him and such. And throughout a lot of, I guess you could say, the movie, if in a funny way, I'm just thinking about this kind of more as I'm talking about this, is you have the knight's old code, and kind of the vows of the knight, the oath that they take. But in between Borim and Draco, you have a lot of, I wouldn't say so much wordplay, but kind of interaction and bouncing off of in between them. So like when he's so when Borin is hunting Draco, and Draco's still in the waterfall, he tries to cook him with fire, and Borin responds about it being a little damp for fire. And then when he's chasing, and Borin hitches his leg with a little rope thing to try and drag him out of the sky. Draco, and to celebrate, Draco drags him through the forest, smacking him into trees, which eventually then Borin hitches the saddle to a tree, dropping Draco out of the sky until they get through their final showdown, draw of Borin and Draco's mouth with a sword at his roof of it. And so kind of the saying of, if your teeth come down, my sword goes up, and Draco responds, if your sword goes up, my teeth come down. So they enter kind of the nice stalemate there. And so kind of what I mean by with the old code and such is a lot of what they do bounces and interacts one for each other. It's very woven together, where one action is preceded by another, and just kind of how they I keep saying play off of each other, but just how the interaction works. And in many respects, it's ultimately like Borin, that if Draco represents the old code, Bourne is having to kind of face that. I say face that, but face that. Every idea that he has and such towards the old code gets kind of just bounced away and played off of by Draco, that represents the old code and kind of what it means and such, and that ultimately, in order to beat the evil King Einan at the end, Bourne needs to, if you haven't seen this, you need to go see it, but he needs to kill Draco, and kind of who's become a good friend to him. And so, this idea that I guess you could say in some respect, you would say that it's almost like killing the old code and abandoning the old ways, but by that point, Bourne has has returned to the old code and accepted it, and it's not going to be continue to be lived on in this old last dragon. It's now going to be lived on in this new knight that will come to rule the land. And so something that stood out for me for a long time was kind of the sacrifice of Draco, and that kind of what it means, kind of at the end, that rather than be selfish or whatnot, there was I say attempt, but the need to not be selfish and to sacrifice oneself, to be selfless, is ultimately what saves the kingdom. And so just kind of that gosh, I don't know how old I was. I was probably like maybe 6 or younger when I first watched this, but that's just a kind of, I guess, a feeling that I've had kind of growing up in a form of respect for it. So that's just a movie that has resonated with me for a very long time, and hence why I rank it as kind of my favorite film. Is what does it mean to me, and it's basically been a great story illustrating, I guess, kind of what I've come to internalize as a lot of my moral code and such. But yeah, so those are just a few thoughts on films I have. I haven't gone incredibly deep into them. I'm doing a lot of this kind of off the cuff because I didn't have a whole lot of time to come up with a real interesting video topic this month. I've been kind of busy, and so this so a lot of it, like I said, is off the cuff and just kind of, I guess, what the thoughts I've had that have resonated with me the most, in a funny way. So I've talked about movies that I've enjoyed, and because it's off the cuff, I can only talk about the biggest portions of those movies that I've enjoyed. So I don't know, maybe it is a very thematically distilled down view of these movies and my thoughts with them, rather than a hugely in-depth, complicated thing with lots of details. So maybe that should say something there. That's its own form of quality control, is what can I pull off the top of my head the fastest. But yeah, so if you've thought these were interesting, if you've wanted to learn more, I said learn more, but experience more storytelling, come check out Gnosis. Like I said, it updates 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You can also get this drawing and a Patreon exclusive drawing over on Patreon by coming up and signing up to become a member. I think to get the Patreon exclusive one it's at the amazing tier, but the other one you can get at lower tiers, or this one you could get at lower tiers. But yeah, so I'd like to thank our patrons on the amazing supporter tier. We have my mom and Yuan Reed. So thank you for your support and allowing me to keep making Gnosis and doing these videos and drawings. So I hope you've had a good day. I hope you've had a good time with this video, and I hope you'll have a good day. Thank you, and goodbye.